I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the clasp of my necklace, whispering to myself, tonight might be different. My name is Elena Carter, 31, and after months of cold calls and stiff silences, my parents had finally reached out. Dinner at the estate, Mom said, voice soft, almost warm. Just the three of us. No distractions. For a moment, I let myself believe it meant peace. A truce. Maybe even a chance to be their daughter again, instead of the daughter they treated like a threat. I slipped on my coat when my phone buzzed. 3 words lit up the screen. Call me immediately. No greeting. No context. The sender. Daniel Reyes, my attorney. I dialed. He answered on the first ring. Voice sharp. Elena. They filed the petition this morning. Emergency conservatorship. Thaddeus and Margaret are claiming you're mentally unfit to run Carter Industries. The air left my lungs. My coat slipped off and hit the floor with a soft thud. What? They've attached affidavits, witness statements. This isn't just talk. They want legal control now. For a heartbeat, the world tilted. I thought of Mom's gentle voice just days ago. Honey, let's talk about the future. And Dad's polite smile at the last board meeting. I thought it meant progress. Instead, it was preparation. They planned this. I whispered, not a guess, but the slow, cold realization of a trap. Daniel didn't soften his tone. Yes. And they're moving fast. The lemon tarts I'd bought on my way home sat on the counter, golden, sugared, perfect. A peace offering meant for parents who had already decided to erase me. I sank onto the bench by the door, heart pounding, staring at the phone in my hand. I couldn't walk blindly into that dinner. It was never an invitation. It was an ambush. And I'd already stepped into their game. If you've ever been betrayed by the people who should have been your biggest supporters, let me know where you're watching from. I could still hear Mom's voice from 3 days earlier, lilting, warm, the kind of tone I hadn't heard in years. Let's talk about the future. Just dinner, the 3 of us. It sounded like a thread sewing something torn, a chance to believe we might find our way back. I wanted to believe it so badly that I stopped at the little bakery near my old school in Cleveland, Ohio, and bought lemon tarts, the kind she used to sneak onto my plate when I was a girl. Now, with Daniel's words echoing in my head, the memory soured. That gentle tone, that invitation, it had been rehearsed. They didn't want my company. They wanted my compliance. I sank deeper into the bench, letting other moments resurface, ones I'd brushed off at the time. Dad cutting me off mid-sentence during a quarterly meeting, finishing my point like I hadn't spoken. Mom's light laugh in front of the staff. Elena forgets things lately, but don't we all? Everyone chuckled. I forced a smile, pretending it was harmless. But it wasn't. It was erosion, steady, silent, intentional. I told myself it was tension, age, family dynamics. I told myself I was imagining it because the alternative was too painful, that the people who raised me were sanding down my credibility in public while feeding me scraps of affection in private. I walked into the kitchen, opened the bakery box. The tarts looked perfect. I pressed the lid shut and shoved it aside. They weren't love anymore. They were evidence, proof of how willingly I'd walked into their setup. The phone still lay in my lap, Daniel's warning burning in my ears. I realized I couldn't afford to be the daughter who wanted peace. I had to be something else, because sentiment had just become ammunition. Daniel slid a folder across his desk. Its weight felt heavier than paper should. I opened it, hands stiff. The first words punched the air from my lungs. Petition for emergency conservatorship of Elena Carter. I forced myself to read each line, though every sentence landed like a bruise. Erratic leadership, emotional decline, inability to sustain judgment under pressure. Statements signed by people I'd once trusted. Affidavits claiming I'd forgotten key dates, dismissed data, relied on emotional whims. The language was clinical, but I could hear my parents' voices behind every lie. Daniel watched quietly, letting me absorb it. They didn't do this alone. 2 investors have signaled support. They want a familiar name, your parents, to reassure them. Stability over vision. I closed the folder, fingers pressing hard into the cardboard. So they trade me, their own daughter, for appearances. He didn't offer comfort. That wasn't his job. They're moving fast. If the court grants temporary control, they could freeze your access to company accounts by Friday. This wasn't theoretical. It was already in motion. I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. I thought of every sacrifice, late nights, missed holidays, the steady climb through recessions and setbacks, only for my parents to claim I was unfit. Not out of concern, out of fear. The folder sat open between us, my name stamped in bold like a target. I looked at Daniel, his steady gaze meeting mine, and felt the shift begin. This wasn't about disappointment anymore. It was survival. I slid the folder back. Then we fight. I sat at my kitchen table long after the sun had set, the petition still echoing in my head. The house was silent, except for the hum of the fridge, but my mind was loud with memories I'd tried to bury. I thought of the last board meeting when a member leaned toward me and said, "Your father mentioned you've been overwhelmed. Maybe it's time to pace yourself." I laughed it off. But now, it landed differently. My parents had been feeding doubts into ears already eager for an easier story. Other fragments came back, small, sharp. A junior analyst offering to clarify my own projections, as if I couldn't read the numbers I'd built. A department head hesitating before answering my questions, waiting to see if mom or dad would speak first. I'd brushed it all aside, told myself I was tired. My eyes drifted to the bakery box. The tarts mocked me now. Not sweet memories. Proof of how easily nostalgia had blinded me. I'd walked into their trap, smiling, arms full of peace offerings, while they sharpened knives behind closed doors. A chill slid through me. What if the board believed them? What if my years of precision and discipline were erased by a handful of affidavits and a rehearsed narrative? The idea pressed on my chest until my breath came shallow. I pressed my palms flat on the table and stood. Fear was dangerous, but denial had been worse. I couldn't afford either. If my parents were willing to fracture me piece by piece, I'd find the cracks in their armor. By Thursday afternoon, I forced myself back to the office. The walls felt different, like even the glass carried whispers. I moved through the corridors with my chin up, determined not to show how much my hands trembled when I closed my door. Their petition had cracked something, but it hadn't broken me. Not yet. I was gathering reports for Daniel when there was a knock. Miles Turner, a junior accountant, stood in the doorway, barely out of college, quiet, always polite. But now his shoulders were stiff, eyes darting to the hall before he stepped in. He held a folded paper like it burned. "Miss Carter," he whispered, "I think you should see this." I reached for it. His fingers trembled. He didn't wait. "Please don't say it came from me." Then he was gone. I unfolded it. An email printed from the company server. Subject: Pre-transition support. Body: Once we assume interim control, bonuses will be distributed accordingly. Signed, Margaret Carter. I read it twice. Then a third time. Interim control. Not if. When. Bonuses for loyalty. This wasn't concern. It was bribery, dressed in corporate font. I pressed the page flat, pulse pounding. All this time I told myself I was overthinking. But here it was black and white. Premeditated corruption. And Miles, quiet, overlooked Miles, had chosen to bring it to me. He could have stayed silent. Safer. Maybe profitable. But he didn't. He saw the truth and handed it to me, trembling but resolute. Something in me steadied for the first time in days. A flicker of clarity. If one young accountant had the courage to stand against them, I had no excuse to falter. I slipped the email into a folder labeled evidence. The fight had shifted. My parents weren't just undermining me. They were buying their future. And I had the thread to unravel it all. I didn't wait. I drove to the estate that evening and walked into the study. Firelight cast their faces in soft amber. For a moment, they looked like the parents I remembered. Dad with his heavy brow. Mom with her careful smile. But the words belonged to strangers. "Elena," Mom began, tone gentle, almost kind. "We never wanted this to feel adversarial. You've done incredible things. But everyone has their time. We just want to make this transition graceful for you. Dad leaned forward, folding his hands like we were discussing the weather. Better to step down before questions are asked. We can keep this quiet. Let you leave with dignity. Mercy, Mom added. This is mercy, daughter. The word hit me like ice. My throat tightened. You filed a petition behind my back. You told the court I'm incompetent. That's not mercy. It's a mask. And I have the receipts. For the first time, their expressions shifted. Mom's smile flickered. Dad's jaw hardened. They exchanged a glance, their united front. I didn't stay. Any more conversation would only give them ground. I turned and walked out, heels echoing on marble, pulse steady. Later in my office, I combed through financial records with a sharper eye. That's when the numbers began to glow like embers. A $12,000 payment to a strategic advisory firm no one had heard of. Another $8,500 to a consultant abroad. No reports, no deliverables. I sat back. The figures screamed louder than words. Fraud wasn't suspicion anymore. It was undeniable, logged, time-stamped. My parents hadn't just tried to take me down with a story. They were funding their betrayal with stolen money. With every document I saved, I knew the facade of mercy was cracking, leaving only cold, calculated strategy behind. By the weekend, my office looked like a war room. Binders covered every surface: medical evaluations, revenue growth, client retention, staff commendations. I built the evidence wall brick by brick, like I'd built the company. First, clean medical reports, 2 specialists confirming no cognitive decline, no impairment. Then 3 years of revenue records, charts proving steady growth, healthy margins, real expansion. On another table, client contracts and thank you notes, proof my leadership wasn't ceremonial. When fatigue hit, I rewatched my keynote at last year's leadership summit, 40 minutes, no notes, every fact delivered with precision. I remembered the standing ovation, the pride. Strangers recognized what my parents had dismissed. As I replayed it, I didn't see sentiment. I saw clarity. That woman was still me. Daniel stood across from me late one night, tie loose, eyes narrowing as he scanned the stacks. This is good, he said, tapping a binder. But remember, they may stage evidence. Fabricated anecdotes. Coached witnesses. Be ready for noise. I nodded, sliding more files into place. Let them try. Numbers don't shake when questioned. I straightened, surveying my arsenal. This wasn't about nostalgia. The lemon tarts, the memories, the longing for reconciliation, those were ashes. What stood before me was my truth. And the courtroom was waiting. The next step wasn't survival. It was war. The courtroom smelled of polish and cold air, the kind of place where truth should cut deeper than sentiment. I walked unsteady, dressed in black. Across the aisle, my parents had staged their tableau. Mom in cream, soft, composed, her face painted in maternal calm. Dad beside her, spine straight, playing the dignified patriarch burdened by duty. Their lawyer began with practiced sorrow. This is not about animosity. It's about concern. My clients are loving parents who've watched their daughter decline, erratic decisions, emotional instability. They acted out of necessity. I kept my hands folded, listening to the fiction they spun. Every word polished. The undertone unmistakable, pity disguised as truth. Then Daniel rose.
Calm.
No theatrics. He slid binders across the bench. Your Honor, the respondent has been medically evaluated by 2 specialists in the last 18 months. Both confirm no cognitive decline. He opened the folder, stamped, signed. Another binder landed, 3 years of revenue growth, client retention, expansion deals, all above industry standards. Charts and contracts passed forward. Finally, Daniel placed down financial records, voice sharp. And here, documentation of unauthorized payments, $12,000 to a shell firm, $8,500 to a foreign consultant. Approved by the petitioners, disguised as company expenses. The judge flipped through slowly, then lifted his gaze. Voice like a hammer. You accuse your daughter of incompetence while using her company's funds against her? Gasps rippled. Mom faltered. Dad stammered. Their illusion cracked. The petition was dismissed. But the gavel didn't just protect me, it turned on them. A review of financial misconduct was ordered. Their fraud dragged into the light. By evening, the board called an emergency session. I sat at the head, Daniel beside me. Members shifted uncomfortably. Daniel presented the evidence: loyalty test emails, shell payments, promised bonuses. Each document landed like a verdict. The vote was swift, unanimous. Thaddeus and Margaret were stripped of all authority, their names removed. For the first time, they had no stage, no script, no power. Mom leaned forward, voice trembling. We only wanted what was best. I met her eyes. You wanted what was yours. I built what was mine. She flinched. Silence. The board turned to me, waiting. The throne they'd tried to seize was gone. Leadership rested where it belonged. I signed the removal papers, no hesitation. The next chapter had begun. 2 weeks later, I walked into the boardroom at 9 a.m. sharp. Every seat filled, airtight with anticipation. As I entered, the members rose, not out of pity, out of respect. I took my place at the head. The chair that once felt heavy now fit like it was made for me. I let the silence settle. This company is my legacy, built on discipline, endurance, choices that were never easy but always deliberate. From today forward, betrayal has consequences, family or not. No one argued. No one looked away. They nodded, some slowly, some with relief. The ground had steadied. The meeting ended quietly. No speeches. No applause. Just clarity. As I left, the corridor stretched before me, bright with morning light. My heels clicked steadily. I passed the corner office they once occupied. Blinds drawn. Desk cleared. Emptiness. I paused. Not a loss. A release. Then I kept walking. I didn't need their approval. What they tried to erase, I reclaimed. What they tried to own, I defended. And in the end, I carried something stronger than inheritance. My worth. Earned, not given. If this story moved you, if you've ever had to fight for your place in your own family, hit the like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever stood up for yourself against family? Where are you watching from? Thank you for listening. And remember, never let anyone trade your future for a seat at their table.